And I'm going to launch the poll. There we go.
Oh, there's the poll. Nice.
Yeah. So, and I think, do we have it set up where panelists can vote? I don't even know.
No, I can't.
I can't vote. That's all right. You don't get to vote.
That's okay. We're pretty confident in our model.
You guys know what you do.
I'm in the category of room for improvement because I know what's in our code, and our code is like, like the big thing for where we are right now is I feel really good about the way we've got it set up in GA3, but we have GA4 set up with a BigQuery database on the back end, and that's where the really good stuff is, but I have not had time to completely rewrite my model from top to bottom because you need to in order to be able to do that.
This is great. So we have people coming in already. If you're joining us, we're just kind of chit-chatting before, and you see the poll, and so far 80% doesn't exist yet. You're in the right place. Like that's great, and that's kind of why we ask this, is we want to get a sense of where people are. And I'm not ashamed to admit it. I've written a book on marketing performance. And I would be very much in the it's lacking help category. Like, it's just one of those things where you do it and then you just sort of fall back into the rut of instinct and, what do we think is going to work? And you don't have the time to dig into the data and the attribution modeling, and you just leave it aside and it slips for months, and then all of a sudden a year, and then you do a webinar and you're like, oh my gosh, we really need to pick it up on what we're doing here.
One of the things that we see a lot with our clients is they will pick an attribution model based on what makes them feel the best about their data versus what's actually reality. And so, the larger the organization, the more teams you have contributing to the end goal. And so, one team was using a last touch attribution model, which, we'll go through the good and the bad of that, but it was because it made their team look the best, and it disregarded all of the other efforts that were happening, and that became a source of tension between the teams because everybody wanted to be the hero of the conversion data.
That's so. See, I come from the PR world. That was my background, my major in college, and started my career in PR. And you want to talk about metrics just make you feel good? Like, that industry is full of it. It's like ad equivalency, PR value. Like, you just made metrics up, and then you made the multiplier up to like make yourself feel good about whatever you did. So yeah, I totally get that. It's, if this team wants credit for the conversion, like the paid team, they're going to want an attribution model. If the demand gen team feels they're doing it, they want a certain attribution model. The social team, like, I could see how there's some infighting about what is the best attribution model based on what makes you look the best.
And I want to stab anybody using view through conversions, because we run into this with a lot of our clients. Every view through conversion thing, like, here's Google's view throughs and Facebook's view throughs. Well, they're all double dipping against each other, and so they're all claiming, like, you've had 500% ROI. Like, well, yeah, because none of you talk to each other. One of our clients, an e-commerce company, was looking at their view throughs, and they're saying, so according to, if we add up all of our view through conversions, we should have sold 5x what we actually sold this month, because everybody is taking credit for the exact same conversions.
It's wild. I love this topic. I'm so glad we're doing this webinar. Again, if you're just joining us, we're just kind of hanging out, chatting. Take the survey if you get a moment. But we're just kind of catching up a little bit. I just find attribution modeling is just that the essential element of every marketing program, and yet my sense is it's often the least gets the least attention, and it is probably a set it and forget it. And again, you two deal with this more than we do, but like, I know for years, like, we're a big HubSpot user. The default was last interaction, I think. And my guess is the vast majority of HubSpot users had no idea. Like, they just didn't play around with it. They didn't even really know if you asked them which version they were using of modeling. And, that's a major problem. And HubSpot's since introduced a lot more, advanced attribution capabilities. But it's the Wild West. So again, we're just kind of hanging out for about one more minute here while we're waiting for everybody to join. If you're just joining us, go ahead and take the survey, trying to get a sense of where people are at with their confidence in the attribution model they're using. And we don't have anyone that says it's great yet. It's we have room for improvement. We have doesn't exist is still is still winning the day at the moment as more people join us here. So yeah, if I had what would you guys have guessed coming in? Like, what would you think the winner would be in this poll?
Honestly, I would have guessed it doesn't exist yet.
Okay. All right.
Yep.
Yeah, that's
Same.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, that is our winner so far.
I think it's one of those concepts that can be intimidating,
Yeah.
but our goal is to make it less intimidating.
All right. So if you're just joining us, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. So if you just joined us, go ahead and get your vote in. Got about 10 seconds here, and then I'm going to close the poll, and we'll share the results with everybody to see what your confidence level is as we kick off the webinar today. And some of the people just jumping in are skewing our results. It doesn't exist is no longer the leader. Yeah, and in the chat, like, go ahead and feel free to send some questions, comments in the chat as we're going. We're all doing these virtual events these days, and sometimes the chat is the most entertaining part and the most valuable part. So, all right, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. Yeah, sometimes it's just distracting, but all right. So our results. So here you go, Chris and Katie, as you're firing up, we've got how would you rate your confidence in the attribution model you are using? Good, but room for improvement is the winner at 45%. It's lacking help, 15%. It doesn't exist, 40%. No one has a great attribution model. So you have your work cut out for you today. All right. So with that, let's go ahead and jump into the webinar. If you're not familiar, if this is your first time, this is part of the Marketing AI Institute's monthly webinar series. We do 1 to 2 of these a month with industry experts. And the whole goal is just to help you understand, pilot, and scale AI. We know from our research that most of you are probably at the understanding phase, just trying to figure out what AI is and where it's going to fit in your marketing mix. Some of you have moved into the piloting phase. We actually just released a state of marketing AI report with Drift 2 weeks ago. 34% said they were at the phase where they're starting to test AI technology, trying to find ways to use it. Only 17% they were at the phase where they're scaling it up, multiple projects going on, seeing success. So we know that most of our audience at that beginner to intermediate phase. And so the content we put out each month is really around trying to help that audience figure this stuff out, make it make sense. And you can go to that URL, the bit.ly URL, Marketing AI Webinars, and all of our webinars are on demand. There's probably about 12 to 15 of them you can check out there. And so for today, go ahead and, so this is Chris and Katie. Welcome, Chris and Katie. So Chris and Katie are 2 of my favorite instructors in our academy. We will talk a little bit about AI Academy for Marketers, but they both spoke at our first Marketing AI conference in 2019. 2 of the people I respect most in our industry. I mean, just super smart. I learn something every time I hear them talk. Quick background on Katie. She has, and Sandy's going to go ahead and put their full bios in the chat, so you'll be able to see their full bios here. But Katie's an authority on compliance, governance, change management, agile methodologies, and dealing with high stakes, no mistakes data. I love that line. I had to use that line from your bio. I think it's just great. She is the CEO of Trust Insights. So welcome, Katie. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
And Christopher S. Penn is an authority on pretty much everything I know. I follow Chris on Facebook and Instagram just to learn about everything. I mean, from politics to food to, beekeeping to whatever it is. Like, Chris just seems to know something about everything. It's just fascinating. But in marketing, analytics, digital marketing, marketing tech, he is a 3-time IBM champion in IBM Analytics. Author of over 24 marketing books, including AI for Marketers, a primer and introduction. So again, Chris, thank you for your time. Thanks for being a part of this. And I'm looking forward to what you both have to say here today. And I will introduce myself real quick and then get out of the way. If you're not familiar with me, I'm the founder and CEO of Marketing AI Institute. And also I own an agency, PR 2020, which was HubSpot's first partner agency back in 2007, when I think they had 150 customers instead of the 100,000 they just announced this past week. So the Institute's mission is, as I was saying up front, we just are trying to make AI make sense. It's really often for a non-technical audience. We're not trying to really teach the machine learning engineers and the data scientists. We're trying to teach the marketing managers to the CMOs what AI is and how they can apply it. And so we do that through content on the site, through our event, through online education, and through webinars like this. And with that, I'm actually going to drop off video. I'll let Chris and Katie do their thing and take it from here. And then we'll be back at the end to do Q&A. And like I said, the Q&A is open. Go ahead and put things in. We'll kind of, put them in the pipeline to ask. And if you have any thing you need to chat with, go ahead and do that. We've got a team ready to help you there. So Chris and Katie, it's all yours.
All right. Thank you so much, Paul. Let's go past the agenda because everyone can read. We want to talk today about exactly. Get to the good stuff. We're going to talk today about attribution modeling. Again, we're going to be looking at the highlights of our 4-hour course, I think. So it's not going to be all 4 hours in 30 minutes. That would be a pain. Why are we talking about this stuff? When we talk about attribution modeling, the number one challenge that we face as marketers is demonstrating the impact of marketing on financial outcomes. Good old Jerry Maguire, show me the money is what the C-suite is asking us for. And we're not really delivering, right? We can't deliver or demonstrate marketing impact. We really, really struggle with this. How much do we struggle with it? In the CMO survey, which is one of my favorite polls, it's a twice a year poll at cmosurvey.org. They ask 500 some CMOs across different industries, a bunch of different questions. And this one was, how are companies demonstrating the impact of marketing spending over the long run? 36% of CMOs said that they can demonstrate quantitatively the impact of marketing, which means 2/3 of us are just guessing. We're either making it up or we have no idea. When you look at the priorities of CEOs, CEOs say their critical priority in 2019, those yellow lines, critical priority, data about your customers and clients' preferences and needs, right? And then financial forecasts, brand and reputation. These are critical needs, 80, 90, 94%. When CEOs are asked, are you getting that information? Look at that, the far left. 15% of CEOs say they're getting data about customers and clients' preferences and needs, about what's working, right? Benchmarking data on industry peers, data about your brand and reputation. It's just terrible. When we look at how marketing itself is doing in the ability to bring all this data together, can we pull together information across the board? For the last decade, we've consistently gotten worse at explaining how data, the marketing data we have, works together. And when we are asked, like, how are we using analytics, this data, to make decisions? Think about this for a second. How much does your company spend on social media marketing, paid or unpaid, right? What's that budget number? How much are you spending on mobile marketing? And then how much are you spending on analytics and attribution analysis? The reality is, according to CMOs, marketing analytics contributes more to company performance than either social or mobile. But I would bet you a small pastry retail value, $5 or less, that you're spending way more on things that deliver less performance, right? What happens when we do that? What happens when we don't do attribution correctly, when we have no idea what's actually working? Well, this happens, right? We run into substantial trouble. Specifically, when we look at what's happening in the market space right now, in 2019, before the pandemic, we were cutting back on budgets, right? We're cutting back last year in the interim CMO survey in the middle of the pandemic. Marketing had taken a huge performance hit, and budgets were being cut left and right. More important, we're still not getting better, right? When you look at how we're using analytics to make decisions, in the August 2019 CMO survey, we're at 39%. The most recent one, the February of 2021, of the February 2020 poll, was at 37%. So we're still not using our data effectively, which means we are still not showing the money, right? We're still not doing the Jerry Maguire. We cannot show the money. Why do we care about this? Why do we care about attribution analysis? It's all about who gets credit, right? So we decide budgets, we decide headcount, we decide focus and resources utilization. All of that is comes from proper attribution analysis. And if we don't get it right, we will misallocate our resources and really screw things up. Attribution analysis is all about cause and effect. Ultimately, you want to get to a point where you can say, if I give Facebook $2 instead of $1, do I see 2x the return? Right? If I give Google Ads $2, do I see commensurate responses in terms of getting more out of it? That's the question we want to answer. To Katie's favorite phrase, that's the so what of marketing attribution. So what? Once you know this, then it's time to dig into what do we do. So let's talk briefly about the attribution lifecycle. So we start with business requirements, then we go into data requirements, collection, data QA, preparation, choosing an attribution model, evaluating whether that model does what we want to do, deploying it, tuning it, and then reviewing to see what happened. So let's kick things off with business requirements. Katie, what should we talking about in business requirements?
Business requirements that is where you figure out what the heck you want to do. So this is the step that I see 100% of the time skipped over because people want to jump right into playing with the data, monkeying with the models, that kind of thing. And I'll be honest, that's a mistake. You really need to sit down and talk about what is it that we want to do with this. So you can see on the next slide, I actually just put this Dilbert. First of all, I love Dilbert because he speaks to all of us. But what ends up happening is unless you're really defining the requirements up front, you don't know what it is you're trying to accomplish with this model. And it can get costly. It can, use time and resources, especially if you're using a data scientist to try to do this attribution. And so you don't have to go in depth and do hundreds of pages of requirements, but what you do need to do is do at least sort of some understanding some personas. So what we have is an example of a very simple persona statement. And this is borrowed from Agile methodology from software development, but it really helps you hone in on what it is that you're trying to accomplish. And if you do nothing else with your business requirements, you should definitely do this so that at the end of the day, when you've run your model, you can say, okay, I accomplished the goal that I was set out to accomplish. I answered the question being asked. And so it's a very simple statement. As a persona, I want to so that. And so the persona being the audience, who is it who you're running this model for, the intent, what is the question being asked so that we understand what's going forward. So you can see I've put together just a couple of examples. So as a CMO, I want to understand which channels are performing so that I know where to allocate budgets and deploy resources. So that goes back to what Chris was saying about, why do we care about this thing? Can we demonstrate the impact? And it's really important to know what's working. And we'll get into each of the different kinds of models and what they're used for, but really just understanding who your audience is, why you're doing this, and what action you're going to be taking is where you need to start with any kind of an attribution project. And you might have multiple audiences, and that's fine as long as you understand how they're going to be using it so that you can then communicate, here's what the data is telling us, and here's the decision you can make with this information. So in order to get to that stage, you need to do what's called KPI mapping. And KPI mapping essentially is just understanding what your goals are. And so if you don't know what the business goals are, it's usually pretty safe to start with something like revenue. So there's likely a revenue target, there's likely, net new customer target. And so what you do with KPI mapping is that you start to backtrack those metrics to figure out what leads to that overall goal. And so in this KPI mapping example, we're using $100,000 as the goal. So let's say that's our revenue goal. Well, in order to get to $100,000, we need 10,000 cart fills because we know that our conversion rate for every cart fill is about 10% of people who actually buy something. So we're just using very simple math here. And so what leads to a cart fill? Well, someone has to visit the site. So using that same 10% conversion rate, we know we need 100,000 site visits in order to get 10,000 cart fills in order to get a $100,000 goal. So Why this is important is because these are the types of things that you then want to include in your attribution model. So what channels, what efforts are leading towards site visits, what channels and efforts are leading towards cart fills, so that when you are allocating budget and resources, you are doing it most efficiently. So an example of this is if you look in your own Google Analytics software, you can see that there are goals set up. There we go. So this is an example of Chris's Google Analytics. And so he has different goals set up based on the things that he cares about for his personal brand. So people buying books, people downloading PDFs, people filling out a contact form. And so those are the goals. And then what you need to do with your KPI map is backtrack what leads to those things. And then you can, when you have that information, you then apply that as you're running your attribution model in your business requirements to say, can I figure out for each step of my KPI map what's leading to that action being taken?
Okay. Once you have the business requirements, which by the way, should take you a long time to map out, right? It's not something you just, whip up and off of a napkin at lunchtime. It really is something that requires a lot of input from folks. You need to look at the data. What data do you have available to you? Because let's be honest, a lot of marketing data that we have is not in the best condition. It's if you're trying to cook and your ingredients suck, no matter how skilled you are, you're not going to create the best possible outcome. So what constitutes good data? Very quickly, it's the 6 C's. Your data has to be clean. It means prepared well, free of errors. It has to be complete. Data can't have missing information. Your attribution model, some of them will completely break if you're missing even a day's worth of data. So you have to fix that in advance. Your data has to be comprehensive. Does it answer the questions that you're asking of it? It goes back to the business requirements. If Katie is asking about revenue and I don't have revenue data in my attribution model, we're not going to do so well. Your data has to be chosen well. That also means getting rid of irrelevant data. Again, with more complex machine learning attribution models, having irrelevant data will screw up the model. You got to get rid of that stuff. Your data has to be credible, meaning it was collected properly, as free of bias as you can make it. There are no shortage of stories about machine learning models that have built-in biases from the data that they collected, and it delivers a bad result. And finally, your data has to be calculable. It has to be something that you can work with. It has to be something that machines and humans can work with equally. So take the time to make sure that the data going into the model works, because again, it's like ingredients. If your ingredients are bad, the food's going to be bad. Once you get the data, then it's time to start building the models or choosing a model, which model you want to use. So Katie, which model should we be thinking about?
So the most common out of the box models are last touch, first and last touch, linear, and time decay. And so Paul had mentioned at the top of the webinar that HubSpot has some attribution modeling built in and that it's become more advanced, but the most common is the last touch. And so a lot of people using Google Analytics, for example, use the out of the box modeling, and those are fine. There's definitely a reason for each of them. So we have a quick little cheat sheet chart where it lists where you can find each of these models and what sort of the ease of use is and the accuracy of them. So the out of the box models are the easiest, but sort of the lowest accuracy, because the most commonly used are first and last touch. And if you have a transactional business, like your site is literally go to the site, buy the thing, and move on with your life, then a first or last touch model is probably fine. It's very transactional. If you don't have access to a more advanced model, then using a time decay model is probably the most accurate, because it's going to take into consideration all of the different kinds of channels that you're using, whether it be social, email, search, those kinds of things. A linear model is good. It gives equal credit across every single thing, but it does include that information around more than just one channel. So like a first and a last touch, you're only going to see, well, email is the thing that's working. Whereas a time decay and a linear model will at least give you more information about the other channels that you're using in order to get to your goal, your conversion. So the out of the box models, they're the easiest to use because they're already built into the software, but they do provide the least amount of detail. Assisted conversions is actually a really good model. It's easier because it gives you more information. I think, Chris, you like to give the example of the basketball game, where just because you're the person who's making the basket doesn't mean that 3 or 4 other people weren't passing the ball around to then get it to you to clear the way to then make the basket. And that's what an assisted conversion model does, is it takes into account all of the other things that were supporting you to get to that end goal. Again, it's a good model to use. It's not as accurate as some of the more advanced attribution modeling. So Chris, do you want to talk about machine learning and deep learning?
Well, sure. So in the middle is the attribution models, the custom ones. So these are position-based models that you can use, that you've built in, that you've constructed within tools like Google Analytics, and you declare what things you think are important. These are okay. They do require more work. But they do require you to also understand what's happening in the consumer's mind, so that like, yeah, webinars like this should count for more than, say, an email or a tweet. And there's a fair amount of subjectiveness to that. Where you get into the interesting stuff is once you start using more complex modeling tools. So in classical machine learning, there are a number of algorithms that you can use to build models based on the data that you take in. Google has one in their Google Attribution product. It uses Shapley values and Shapley game theory, which is kind of like a poker game where, if a new player sits down at the table, everyone's habits change based on that player. The old joke is, if you can't spot the sucker at the poker table, the sucker is you. The same is sort of true in the attribution modeling with the Shapley values. When a new channel sits down in the marketing mix, how do the other channels change? At Trust Insights, we use Markov chain modeling, where we look at the path that somebody takes through all the different channels to get to you. And some paths yield conversions, some don't. So we would use this particular technique to generate a model of these are the things that are likely to cause a conversion. There are other techniques too, depending on how complex your marketing mix is. So for example, if you have a lot of offline things like television and radio and billboards, you would have that data brought in, and you would use a technique like gradient boosting machines or XGBoost to try and understand the variable importance of any given individual channel. And then at the most complex level is when you start using deep learning, neural network models, to extract out as much performance and signal as possible. And in a lot of cases, have machines kind of making decisions on their own internally to decide, okay, these are the things that the machine thinks are the most relevant or the most impactful. Machine learning models are difficult to get up and running, right? They do require some technical experience. There are a lot of companies that promise it. We have not seen a lot of companies be able to deliver on that promise really, really well. And then the deep learning models are the best in class. They are extremely difficult to get running. And they have a very high technical bar, but the accuracy they give is best in class. And so for companies where you absolutely positively must get it right, that would be the models to use. We had a poll running, and the poll said for folks who have models out there, most 41% are using out-of-the-box models, followed by so that middle custom version at 32%, then none of the above, also 32%, and then there's one person who's using deep learning models. So that one person gets a gold star for today.
But given the fact that people are using at least out-of-the-box models is a good thing, because the question that we're often asked is, what's working in marketing? Which of my efforts are the most valuable? And even starting with those out of the box models is a great place, and then you can learn from that and start to advance up into the more complicated models.
Exactly. So once you've got a model and you've got it running, you just kind of throw it out there and go on with your life, right?
Nope.
Not really. One of the things that you need to be doing is evaluating your models to see, are they performing well? In a lot of tools, you will see, like this is Google's attribution tool, like, quantitatively, this model is not performing, right? You can see just from the explanation here on screen, this model's got some serious problems. If you've got a channel that's delivering negative revenue, this model clearly has not worked. And there's two aspects to model evaluation. There is interpretability and explainability. Explainability is you look at the results and go, that makes no sense. This model fails. Interpretability is you then, if for the more complex models, you open up the hood, you look in the code and go, ooh, I see what I did wrong, which happens to me about twice a day. And you need to be doing both. You need to be evaluating the model performance. Did it, what error metrics did you use? What's the margin of error to decide whether or not a model is performing? When we do this for clients, sometimes it takes, a few days to do enough model runs to find that right balance of error metrics to say, yes, this is the model that's working. We did this very recently, and it took a couple of days for one of our larger clients to finally have a model that was statistically relevant. But that's not the only thing to look at, right? You also have to look at your model results qualitatively and compare them to each other and go, you know what? This makes logical sense, or this doesn't reflect reality. Sometimes when you're doing customer journey modeling, you end up with a customer journey that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And you go, well, that doesn't seem like reality is being reflected well. Like, where is my Google ads? It's not showing up properly in the model. So you do have to have that qualitative gut check of, this looks terrible. Like this makes no logical sense. It doesn't reflect reality. When you do this, you have to then go back to your modeling, whatever model you're choosing, and maybe choose a different one. So you'll notice in some tools, for the built-in ones, you can actually compare models, look at them side by side and see, okay, is there a different model that I should be using that is better or worse? When you look at the more complex machine learning models, you would compare, 5 or 10 or 15 models at the same time and go, okay, should I be choosing a different model? Key question that you should have defined in sort of the data requirements as well as the model selection point is, what error metrics am I using? Am I choosing the right model based on the correct error metrics? And after all said and done, you end up with needing to decide what happened.
And that's exactly it. And so, to Chris's point, it's not a set it and forget it. Once you've run the model, you need to review it. And so, as Chris was mentioning, we have one client that we've been working with where we have been reviewing the model over and over and over again, because we're finding, we're asking different questions based on what we're seeing. So, we have sort of the general punch list of things that you should do after you've run the model. And so you want to do your after action review. And this is basically what we were just describing, is you want to take a look at the output of what you've done, and does it align with what the goal you set at the beginning with your business requirements? Does it answer the question? Can you make a decision from it and feel confident about it? So you need to make sure that you're reviewing everything you've done up until that point. Did we keyway everything? Did we ask all of our questions? Is there more that we could have done? Is there other data that we could have considered? Doing a project postmortem. And so if you're working with a larger team, or if you're working with your clients, what worked? What didn't work? What would we do differently next time moving forward? Would we spend more time defining our business requirements and our personas? Are we asking the right questions? Are we setting the right goals? And so really sort of picking apart every single step of it is the only way that you can learn from it and get better. And that's where you start to take all of that information, bundle it up into your lessons learned, and say, we as a team are going to commit to doing better. So here's the next steps and how we're going to implement those changes. And it's a constant loop. And so if you remember, Chris showed that circular attribution life cycle. It is a life cycle that keeps going around and around. So attribution modeling is not a one-time thing. It's something that should be repeated consistently, maybe once a month, maybe once a quarter, but definitely making sure that you're not skipping over things like business requirements and QA and reselecting and your project review.
All right, Paul, I think is going to talk more about the 4-hour version of this webinar.
So I have to I'm gonna mute myself and come back on camera, huh? I gotta figure out how to turn my camera back on. Oh, here we go. You'd think I'd used Zoom once or twice in my day. So yeah, thank you. I mean, we already have questions rolling in. So if you have questions, go ahead and throw them in the Q&A or throw them in the chat. I have about 20 questions. But yes, there is so Katie and Chris teach a certification course on this topic. This is kind of a snippet of their 3-hour course where you can go through and get full certification as part of our AI Academy for marketers. And Chris and Katie actually have multiple courses. Chris has one on bias, Katie has one on content. So Sandy from our team just put a link to their attribution modeling certification course in there. And on the next slide, there's a little bit more about Academy. So if, again, these webinars are free, we create tons of free content. And the whole idea is if you get to the point where you're like, okay, I'm ready, like I need to go to the next level. I want to be that internal champion to advance AI within my organization. I want to use it in my career. That's what we built the Academy for. And it's a membership program with a private community where people like Chris and Katie are actually active in the Slack channel, helping people out. So again, if you're interested in that, you can check that out. But again, if you just want to take advantage of the webinars every month and the free content, like have at it. We're just trying to create awareness and understanding of AI in the industry and do whatever we can to help you move your career forward a little bit. So with that, I want to go right into the questions because we've got some great ones. The first one I love, and I can't wait to hear the response to this. So when I think about attribution model, a question that pops up is how should we deal with the end of the third-party cookies? How do you guys address this issue? So let's talk about cookies and their role in all this tracking and reporting and how you look at the future of where we're going to go with that.
Yep. So the third-party cookie is on its death's door as it is, and by 2022, it will be highly unreliable and barely available. Specifically, Apple in its Safari browser and its intelligent tracking prevention has already started blocking third-party cookies in both iOS and the desktop. You see this in regular Safari. It says, "Hey, Safari has blocked 107 cookies this week." Google has announced a similar for what's happening with its Chrome browser in 2022. And here's the thing: marketers have gotten lazy. Right, we've relied too much on third-party services to hand feed us the data instead of having proper governance and tracking and tagging upfront. If you're using for digital stuff in particular, if you're not using things like ETSID codes in Omniture or UTM codes in Google Analytics on everything across the board, you're missing out. You're missing out on solving these problems relatively easily. A lot of these ad systems, yes, if no cookie is passed along, that's fine. But if the data is embedded in the URL, that is not going to be blocked and chopped off, right? So a lot of that tracking and tagging has to happen. Katie, you want to talk about the experiences we've had with some of our clients with the just the tracking governance?
Yeah.
No.
No, I mean, so the sigh is really just, it's unfortunate because tracking it's actually not nearly as onerous or difficult as, it feels like. When we say the word governance, it feels like this big, like, change management thing, but really it comes down to everyone using, a spreadsheet that you can consistently create rules around of, like, these are the only sources, these are the only mediums, and this spreadsheet automatically creates the URL for you. And so really, anyone who isn't using something consistent like that, set up a Google sheet and just sort of put those columns in of, like, here's what the campaign is, here's where it's, being posted, and here's the source of medium that I want to use. We see a lot of errors with UTM tracking because there are some tips and tricks, like case sensitivity, making sure that those things are accounted for. And Chris, you were just mentioning to me this morning that Google Analytics 4 will no longer offer channel grouping. So if you're not using UTM tracking, then you're going to have a really hard time distinguishing your campaigns from one another, because Google's going to do its best. But anyone who's familiar with the Google Analytics infrastructure setup, the channel groupings out of the box are generally wrong. And so things like email and social get eaten and are just either categorized as referral or direct.
Yep. Two other things that marketers should be doing. Number one, you should have a backup analytics system that is examining server logs, right? Because server log data is something that no third-party cookie can mess with, no browser can block. If someone's on your site, they are generating server log data. There are great free open source tools like Matomo that can process server logs for you. I don't realize this is a throwback to 2003, but it is still the immutable source of truth because someone was on your server and you can see what they did there. Two, marketers should be investigating, and we certainly are for ourselves and for our clients, server-side tagging. So Google Tag Manager, for example, has a server-side tagging option, which is again operates at the server level. Does not require the client, does not require the JavaScript to be processing the data. It does at Facebook. Just announced they're really pushing hard on the conversions API, which is their version of server-side tagging, where again, it processes on the server side and then sends data back to Facebook saying, hey, this conversion happened, whether or not you can see it from the client side. The server-side tracking will push that data back and will keep your Facebook data in particular relatively up to date. There's a lot of technical stuff that has to go into it, but the challenge with attribution is going to be solved largely on the infrastructure level.
So there's more great questions I want to get to from attendees, but I have one myself. So if I'm a HubSpot user, which we are, and if I'm a Google Analytics user, which we are, and those are my two primary sources of truth for our data, the things you're talking about to me are like, whoa, like, okay, there's maybe somebody on our team who can help with some of that, but at what point does an organization need a team like yours that knows all this stuff? So we had all those people who are out of the box. Some were like, I'm not doing anything. Like, you're talking about some highly technical things. Do I need to be a certain size organization? Do I need a certain number of users? Do I need certain revenue models? Like, when do I need expert help to figure this stuff out? When do I need to go beyond the out of the box stuff?
Honestly, it goes to when you suddenly start seeing your performance and your data getting, obscure. Like, hey, our sales are down, our sales are okay, but our ability to understand sales has been blinded like by 40%. Like, we have 40% of our sales have no attribution. We don't know why, right? Once you start getting to a certain point where you're like, I don't trust my reporting anymore, that's when it's time to call in some help.
Okay. All right. So a great question here. How do you best attribute marketing spend when you have a multi-year sales horizon, which I'm sure a lot of B2Bs deal with this? So I use incremental sales against baseline, yet it's not always clear since there are so many touch points and costs associated. Can AI help me bring this disparate internal cost to create a model to show ROI on marketing spend?
Yeah. If you have multi-year data and it is at the person level, and you have all the touch points logged, you can actually build a very robust model. In this case, you'd probably be using one of a couple things. You can use Markov chain modeling if you've got the person's individual pathing and tracking through your site, through all the channels and all the touch points. So a really good CRM system would be actually have that data. A good marketing automation system would have that. You will have to extract the data and build that. If you don't have that data, or it's not clean and clear, we actually had this with a client recently. As long as you have day, or even better, hourly level data for those multiple years, you can use a gradient boosting model to and extract out the variable importance to say, okay, these are probably the things that have a strong likely impact on conversion, and then use that as your testing plan for hypothesis testing. It looks like a combination of Facebook and direct mail and tweets with the poop emoji, and then that magic combination seems to be what is it. So you would build a hypothesis saying, okay, we're gonna run some more Facebook ads, we're gonna tweet with the poop emoji 5 times as much as we normally do, and do we see a commensurate increase in the sales number based on it. So that's how you would tackle that from a modeling perspective. Another approach you could take at the person level, again, if you have the person level data, is propensity scoring modeling, where you can say, okay, I'm going to classify sales, people who've bought something, as people who've done the thing, and classify people who've not bought the sale, and then look at the differences in those populations, trying to essentially almost retroactively construct an A/B test to see what the difference is in a given population. And if you're using really good machine learning software, it will also help you identify, like, try and take out covariates. Like, the example we always give is in healthcare. If you're doing a test to see whether smoking is harmful or not, you have to account for age and gender and weight and diet and all these things, and take those out of the mix so that you can see just the smoking part. The same thing is true in your modeling for that kind of situation.
do you need an X amount of leads for machine learning to become relevant? Like, if you're in a B2B environment, like a professional services firm, for example, and maybe they only bring on 10 new clients a year and they're big clients, but that's all they're bringing in. And maybe it's only 50 leads. Is machine learning even viable in that scenario?
Not at that level. What you have to do is you have to, so what Katie was talking about earlier about KPI mapping, your KPI map should match up to your MarTech stack, right? So your revenue is like in your accounting system, right? Your prospects are probably in your marketing automation system. And then your audience is going to be in like your web analytics. If you don't have enough data further down the stack, go up layers of the stack and your KPI map until you have enough data to build a model. And if you just don't have enough data, period, you also don't have an attribution problem because you know where the 5 customers came
Right.
from.
Makes sense. No, that's good. All right. We had a question about how often you need to change or adjust your attribution model as the organization's strategy changes or as the markets change. Is it a monthly thing, a quarterly thing? How often are you looking at that attribution model and testing it?
I think it depends. So it depends on how often those other factors, such as your strategy, or if you're entering new industries and verticals, or if you're trying to tap into new audiences, that's when you should probably re-examine your business requirements for your attribution model. So maybe if you started off as just a transactional website, but now you've moved into part marketing brochure and content and this, then obviously you should be examining how you're looking at that data as well. So we recommend at least once a year as sort of that annual review to look at the attribution model as a whole. But for a lot of our clients and for ourselves, we run it once a month just to sort of see what's changed. And we can, by doing that more frequently, we can also stay on top of any sort of anomalies in the data itself. And so, I know we keep referring back to, this one client, but they have the most amount of data and the most amount of variables. And so we often see when they introduce something new, like a mobile experience, for a couple of months, that completely skewed the data and gave us an opportunity to go back and talk with them about that and say, are the approaches, the right approaches? Are you tracking it correctly? Are we tracking it correctly? And then for us, we were able to see for a little while that, we were over indexed on email and nothing else. And that was, our own like, oh, okay, we're not doing anything besides sending out the newsletter. So what else could we be doing?
As you were showing the KPI mapping, the thing I kept thinking of is the impact that should have on lead scoring models. When you're thinking about attribution modeling, are you often also thinking about the lead scoring? Because it seems like that KPI hierarchy should actually be the weights of your scores as you're going down. Is that true?
Yes.
Exactly right.
Okay.
Exactly right. In fact, you should be using the variable importance data from like a regression model as part of your lead scores, right? Use as a multiplier on your lead score. If you see that webinars are 42% of your conversions, well, guess what? In your lead scoring model, times 1.42.
Gotcha. That's great. All right. The question about a lot of the easiest ways to look at attribution models are in Google platforms like analytics, ads, Google attribution. What would be the best way to look at when you spend money in Facebook, considering Facebook and Google don't communicate well between each other?
So that's not true.
Okay.
If you have good tagging and tracking and governance, right? If your Facebook ads, if you're not putting in things like the UTM tracking codes, which is actually, there's a spot right in the interface for that, then yeah, you're kind of at the mercy of whatever Mark Zuckerberg wants to tell you. But if you have done the UTM tracking and tagging correctly, you will see Facebook ads show up, nice and clean. For several of our clients that run Facebook ads, they do the UTM tracking and tagging as part of their onboarding process when they set up new ads, and it comes in very nicely. It shows up in the model perfectly. So that's a governance question.
Okay, that's good. Are there any AI, ML attribution modeling and actionable insights products for mid-sized businesses who can't afford the big company attribution models?
So here's the thing. There's 3 things that help you decide about AI, the use of AI, right? It's time, money, and strategy, right? Most companies are not going to be, selling attribution models. So they probably, are just going to look to either buy or build. And that means that if you have time and you don't have the money to afford, some of the bigger AI vendors out there, guess what? You're going to open up Python for Dummies and you're going to learn to build your own attribution model.
You're going to, I'm not doing that.
if in all seriousness, if you care enough about it and it's a priority for your company and you don't have the money to buy it, you can learn to build it. It is not so arcane that it is, it's not black magic, right? It is math and science and stats, and you can learn that. It may take time. It may take you 6 months, 12 months, 18 months to learn it well enough to be able to do it. But that's what's going to happen. If you have the money and you don't have the time, you're going to buy it off the shelf from somebody. I would encourage you, if you are interested in AI for marketing, to at least give the building part a try, because nothing teaches you like how a dish is made, like trying to cook it yourself, right? Even if it's a disaster, like there's those great Pinterest, like how it looks on Pinterest, how it turned out when I made it. The pictures are very, very different. It's the same thing with attribution modeling. I would encourage people, give it a try. You may find out, yeah, this is not for me. This is, this is going nowhere, and that's okay. But at least you give, but at least you've given it a shot.
But in a mid-market team, I mean, you have people on your team. You probably have, multiple members in your team. Are you thinking like you're just looking for the technical person, the analytics person, like the one who maybe is predisposed to want to go a little deeper on this? Like that's the person you're probably targeting, right?
Katie, go ahead.
Well, I guess so. There's two things. So to answer your question, Paul, so yeah, you definitely want to work with the person who already has an analytics background. If you don't have an analytics background, you need to start there first before jumping into doing that more advanced modeling. And even having a little bit of maybe a developer programming background would be helpful, because you are looking at, language systems such as R or Python and being able to interpret those. But I think part of the question, Chris, is are there any off-the-shelf companies that offer attribution modeling outside of Google or HubSpot or Trust Insights, for example?
None that I trust, because they all say we have a proprietary model and blah 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 blah. And they tell you what's going on inside the box. And when you talk to them, the sales guy will promise you the moon. When you talk to the developers, those companies, if you're allowed to, they just say, no, we don't do that. I remember we were at the MarTech conference a few years ago here in Boston, and I got a chance to pull aside one of the developers for this product, and like, so what's actually under the hood? Oh, it's just a random forest generator. I'm like, I mean, that's okay, because what they were trying to do was, you didn't need more than that. But the developers like, oh yeah, the sales guys are saying is, it's the most advanced AI on the planet. Like, that's just a random forest. Same thing that we've been using, decision trees for since the 70s, but it works. Here's the other thing in your company, and this is a people problem. This is not a technology issue. Almost nobody spends enough time to actually understand what resources they have available. We were working with a partner agency that claims to be this, data and analytics and insights, company, whatever. And the top executives on a good day can't find their butts with both hands in a flashlight. And they're like, well, we're really struggling to get a handle on this data science and machine learning thing. And, it's just impossible. Then in the course of a project we were working with them, we ran into this one young woman who was on staff as an analyst. You spend some time talking to her and look at her background, check her out on LinkedIn. Like, holy crap, this person has a data science degree from a company, a university in another country, has experience in Python, experience in R, experience building with classical machine learning. I'm like, so the CEO of this company has no idea that within the ranks of their own company, they have somebody who has those capabilities, but they've been pigeonholed in this, data analyst job, and never talked to the person, doesn't know that they're there. And so they have this talent that's just untapped. And so and this is something that, Katie really specializes in, part of it is just talking to people in the company and figuring out, hey, do you have the talent?
I love that as an actionable starting point, is like looking at your team with fresh eyes and saying, are there people here we're underutilizing? I'm going to ask one more question before we start wrapping up. So Google Analytics is obviously, most companies have access to that. How well they're using it, to be determined. But I know they've made advances in the last 12 months. I know there's new capabilities within it. Why don't you just take a minute or two and tell us about what are maybe some of those newer features that people might not be familiar with or might not realize they have access to that could be helping in these areas?
So there's two versions of Google Analytics now, right?
Okay.
There's Universal Analytics GA3, which is what pretty much everybody on the planet uses. And then there's this new thing, Google Analytics 4, which if you've ever done any mobile marketing, mobile analytics marketing, you've probably heard the term Google Firebase. So Firebase was Google's analytics suite for mobile apps. Google Analytics 4 is an evolved version of Firebase that basically, tacks on the web components to the already existing mobile components. And the reason Google did this is that they're realizing more and more companies have mobile apps and mobile experiences that customers spend a lot of time in. Like, everybody and their cousin lives on this device, right? They literally, this is like your second brain. And so Google said we need to help companies get a handle on not only what's going on in the app, not only what's going on the website, but what's happening between the two, like how things interact, how users, because you may say, yeah, this user never comes back to a website. Yeah, but they're in your app every single day. And so we want to see that as a consolidated stream. So GA4 is an evolution in order to be able to see that. What's substantially changed is up until now, Google Analytics 3 has kind of been an all-in-one, right? It has a way to collect data. You put your analytics tracking code on. It has a way to process the data in Google Analytics. And it has some reporting, some dashboards and some reports and things. GA4 has split that into three pieces. Your collection and tracking and goals and things all now occur in Google Tag Manager. Like that's where a lot of that stuff has gone. Google Analytics is the processing and analysis hub. It is now a true BI tool, where you can slice and dice and process data. But the reporting sucks. And there was a reason for that. Google said, we want reporting in Data Studio. That is where you construct end user stuff. So you do all your fact finding and data science in Google Analytics 4. And then once you found the answer, you put it in Data Studio in a distilled version that the users can't screw up or badly misinterpret. The big thing for those of us who are in marketing AI and machine learning and data science is that now, assuming that you set your account up correctly, your Google Analytics data gets pushed into Google's BigQuery database. You can set up a BigQuery instance. And so you get the raw minute by minute, blow by blow, hit by hit data inside of a BigQuery database. And that's where the gold is, because you can build your own custom models. If you are familiar with Google's BigQuery ML, you can actually run machine learning models right inside BigQuery and construct stuff that is way more advanced than what Google Analytics itself can do, because obviously it's being done inside BigQuery. So if you're familiar with it, you can extract a lot of value from it. And so there's some really, really exciting opportunities. We are not seeing customers and clients adopt it yet because it is a substantially different application. It is our advice right now to clients is get Google Analytics 4 set up, get it collecting data, get the BigQuery database installed. Don't worry, Google is not going to make GA3 go away anytime soon, probably a couple of years at least of shelf life for it. But change the way you think about analytics, right? Katie was talking about in our talk today about how channel groupings have gone away. They're no longer part of Google Analytics in GA4. And the reason for that is Google basically said, yeah, channel groupings and medium are kind of redundant. So we're just people should be using source medium, which then if you're screwed up the tags and you have no governance, you're going to have terrible data in Google Analytics.
All right, I just found the next course that you need to teach for Academy and maybe a session for our MakeCon virtual. I want how to use AI within GA4, because we did what you said. We set it up just to start collecting the data, but we have not activated it for ourselves and we're not doing it for our clients. And I just, I would love to see that. Here's the 7 steps to get insights out of GA4. So put me on your schedule. We're gonna have a conversation about that. All right. Well, this has been awesome.
$1 million.
This is just great. I appreciate. I mean, the vast majority of people who joined us are still hanging around for the Q&A. So I appreciate everybody that stuck around. And participated today. That this will be available on demand. We'll probably have it to you tomorrow with the deck and the link. You know, again, just really appreciate Chris and Katie. Thank you so much. Like I said, I learn so much every time, but unfortunately I now have a to-do list. It's like, oh gosh. So thank you again for everything you do for our community, you know, for this webinar and the content you've created for Academy, and look forward to continuing our collaborations moving forward. So thanks again, guys.
Thank
All
you.
right. And we'll talk to everybody soon. Thanks again.